Are you going to run again, Mr. President?
Oh, that's a tough question. Actually, for me, it's an easy question, but I think you're going to be happy. Let me put it that way, okay? I think you're going to be very happy. November 2024, they will find out like never before. We did it twice, and we'll do it again.
There's no mystery here. This is going to happen. But when? That's the question Trump himself posed in his interview with Newsy. Quote, do I go before or after? That'll be my big decision. The before or after that he's referring to is the midterm elections. It's pretty clear that Trump is leaning toward before. Quote, I just think that there are certain assets to before. Let people know. I think a lot of people would not even run if I did that, because if you look at the polls, they don't even register. Most of these people, and I think that you would actually have a backlash against them if they ran. People want me to run. That certainly is a major decision why Trump world would want to declare. He wants to limit the competition he would face in a Republican primary, particularly since a clear rival to Trump's supremacy in the Republican Party has emerged in Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. With each new poll, it seems like DeSantis draws closer and closer to Trump and further from all the other Republicans thought to be eyeing 2024. If Trump announces a run now, he could try to thwart DeSantis' momentum and prevent the MAGA crowd from getting too cozy with the Florida governor. Trump, for his part, continues to act like DeSantis isn't a threat, as he continues to publicly minimize him, telling New York Magazine, quote, he came to me for an endorsement because he was at 3%. He said, referring to DeSantis' 2018 bid for governor, the race was over, and I think Ron knows that better than anybody. We have a good relationship, and there may be some others soon, but that's okay. They may have a good relationship, but if Trump announces before DeSantis' re-election bid in Florida in November, here's a possibility. Trump might call on DeSantis to support him, and if he doesn't, potentially punish DeSantis in his re-election bid. And then if DeSantis doesn't win re-election, that hurts DeSantis in 2024. The other big reason Trump might want to announce now is to upstage the ongoing January 6th committee. The proceeding has gotten a lot of attention, and the former president could potentially use a 2024 announcement as a way to take back the megaphone and argue that any findings of the investigation are just an effort to hurt his 2024 bid. But the strategy of an early announcement doesn't come without risks. For one thing, the announcement is a card that Trump can only play once, and likely lead to a bump for him. But if he announces too early, he'll have one less tool he can use if he's lagging and needs to turn things around. And once he announces, it also means his legal bills won't be covered by the RNC. Party Chair Ronna McDaniel is reportedly against Trump announcing before the midterms and has made it known that the RNC, which paid Trump's $1.6 million legal bills in the investigation into his New York business practices last winter, will no longer pick up the tab once he declares. And right now, Republicans are thought to have a good chance to take both the Senate and the House in November, but Trump could potentially have a galvanizing effect on Democrats in the fall. And if Republicans were to lose the Senate after a Trump announcement, he could be blamed. But of course, the fate of the Republican Party in November may matter less to Donald Trump than what is best for Donald Trump. Joining us now is Chris Stirewalt, political editor for NewsNation, and Allison Young, a Republican strategist out of Pennsylvania. Thank you both for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, so Allison, if you were advising Trump on this campaign, would you advise him to jump in now or after the midterms?
Dan, I'm firmly in the wait category. I feel like there's too much risk right now. The only payoff that I see right now is this clear the deck strategy, right? If you announce and you raise a ton of money off your initial announcement, that works well for you. But I think there's too much risk here for President Trump, and I am firmly in the you should wait category, because I think that the PR game that he'll win now by distracting from the January 6th hearings isn't enough, and he's going to need a bump in later after the midterms and early next year. I'm on the wait category.
All right, but that's on the what he should do. So, Chris, now I'm going to ask you on what you think he will do. When are most people expecting he's going to announce?
Well, I gave
Dan,
up
you said
trying to
let me
analyze.
let Chris on this one. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I gave up trying to analyze what Donald Trump was thinking a long time ago. And the other thing, of course, that Trump has in his advantage, and this, what you saw in the New York Magazine story parallels what leaks that very obviously seem to be coming from Trump himself to the Washington Post, trying to crank up this discussion of late. And you're going to find a lot of reporters who are very credulous about this question. I think you were quite right when you framed it this way. There's no surprise. Donald Trump, at the very least, must keep up the appearance that he is going to run for president well into through 2023, at least, for a lot of reasons that relate to his legal status, that relate to his fundraising capacity, that relate to a lot of things. The chalk inside the Republican Party for Ron DeSantis and everybody else who's going to run for president is they have to assume that Donald Trump is running. Obviously, it would be bad for Republicans if he were to declare now, because then every candidate running for office in every swing district and every battleground state then has to take a position on whether they support Donald Trump's candidacy for president. And that's a bad news thing for Republicans. Democrats don't want to talk about Biden this fall. Republicans sure don't want to talk about Trump this fall. So I don't know what he's doing. But usually with Trump, the roads lead back to fundraising, the roads lead back to attention, and I think that's probably what this is.
You mentioned the leaks, and Allison, you believe the leaks are quite significant.
I do. I served in the senior staff of the George W. Bush administration, and that was a very locked down communication team. And it's a completely different thing now with President Trump, where you've got all these staffers and people out there leaking, trying to make a name for themselves. And what it's doing, it actually hurts, I think, the president, because what it causes is chaos and confusion among the two groups of people you're trying to court right now, which are voters and donors.
Chris, how significant is the Ron DeSantis factor in Donald Trump's decision-making?
Well, the problem for Trump is that he is a fixed target now. He is like the MAGA version of Jeb Bush. Everybody knows the tricks. He's not the insurgent anymore. He's the front runner, and he is a stationary target. DeSantis has more room to move. He has more, he can go more different directions. And remember, most Republicans would rather have somebody other than Donald Trump. So the longer he's out there as a candidate, the longer there is for there to be some sorting out. Will it be Mike Pence? Who will be the candidate who will be the nationalist out of some of the Trump mold, but a Trump without Trump? Who will be that candidate? And the more time that Trump gives them to sort that out, the worse it is for Trump.
Allison, isn't it kind of amazing that Jeb Bush has become kind of the Dukakis of Republicans? This idea that, like you mentioned, Jeb Bush always is sort of like the example these days of how to go about losing. It's really sort of startling.
Okay, I'll give you that. But I also, we now have a president who lost a popular election, who lost an election, who is now going to run again. Like, there are no rules anymore. There just aren't any. And, poor Jeb Bush, but, poor Republicans if we wind up with Donald Trump being the front runner again.
But it is clear, there is no suggestion, Chris. You mentioned that he's at least got to act like he's running through 2023. I don't think anyone around Donald Trump believes he won't run.
I have talked to people who are in his orbit, and I think there is some question about it. Look, if it looks like it's going to be hard, and it looks like it might be a real challenge. One of the big problems Trump has, and that his political handlers have experienced with him, he doesn't listen to bad news, he doesn't take direction, and he doesn't like to work hard. And if what this looks like is a long slog, punching it out with Ron DeSantis, dealing with Mike Pence, dealing with whoever else will show up out there to fight him, that doesn't sound like as much fun as getting to seagull management. You fly in, you defecate all over everything, you make a lot of noise, and then you fly away.
Maybe it's just me. I'd never heard that. It's a great example to use. I'm not familiar with the term, but I'm familiar with what seagulls do. Allison Young, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Chris Steyerwalt is going to stick around. Coming up, thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.